If you're over 60 and walking has started to feel more like a risk than a remedy, you are not alone, because stiff knees, aching hips, and that quiet fear of losing your balance can slowly turn a simple walk into a daily source of anxiety. What if the advice to just keep walking is no longer the smartest strategy for your joints or your safety? There is a gentler, surprisingly powerful chair exercise that can strengthen your legs without putting you at risk. Walking has long been praised as the safest and simplest exercise for adults over 60, yet many people quietly notice that what once felt refreshing now feels draining, unstable, or even painful in ways they struggle to explain. The discomfort often begins subtly, perhaps as a faint stiffness in the knees during the first few steps of the morning, or a tight pulling sensation in the hips after a short trip to the store. But over time, that mild irritation can grow into persistent soreness that lingers, long after the walk has ended. This shift is not a personal failure, and it is not a sign that you are lazy or incapable, but rather a reflection of how the body changes with age and how repetitive movement interacts with those changes in ways that are often misunderstood. After 60, the protective cartilage that cushions the joints is usually thinner than it once was, and the fluid that helps joints glide smoothly may not circulate as efficiently as it did decades earlier, which means every step carries slightly more friction than before. At the same time, muscle mass naturally declines in a process called sarcopenia, and when the quadriceps and glute muscles lose strength, the joints are forced to absorb more of the mechanical load that strong muscles use to manage with ease. When you walk for extended periods without sufficient muscular support, the knees and hips can begin to experience compressive forces that accumulate gradually, creating inflammation that does not always appear immediately but builds quietly over weeks or months. Another factor that often goes unnoticed is balance control, which relies on a complex coordination between muscles, nerves, and the inner ear, and this system also becomes less responsive with age if it is not specifically trained. Walking on uneven pavement, navigating curbs, or adjusting to small changes in surface height requires rapid muscle activation that weaker legs may struggle to provide, increasing the feeling of instability that makes many older adults anxious during what used to be a simple stroll. That anxiety is not irrational, because falls are a leading cause of injury after 60, and when confidence decreases, posture often changes in subtle ways that further strain the lower back and hips. Many people attempt to solve this discomfort by walking more, believing that pushing through the stiffness will somehow rebuild strength. Yet walking is primarily a repetitive endurance activity, rather than a targeted, strength-building exercise. While it certainly supports cardiovascular health, it does not provide the focused resistance needed to rebuild the specific muscles that stabilize the knees and hips, which means the underlying weakness may persist even as step counts increase. This mismatch between effort and outcome can be deeply frustrating because you may feel as though you are doing everything right while your body continues to signal discomfort. It is also important to understand that inflammation in aging joints is often cumulative, meaning that small amounts of irritation repeated daily can create a cycle of swelling, stiffness, and guarded movement that gradually reduces mobility rather than improving it. When joints are irritated, the surrounding muscles sometimes tighten protectively, limiting range of motion and altering walking mechanics in ways that place even more strain on already vulnerable structures. Over time, what began as a well-intentioned health habit can unintentionally reinforce the very limitations you are trying to overcome. Recognizing this pattern is not about abandoning movement or fearing activity, but about understanding that the type of movement matters deeply, especially after 60 when recovery capacity is slower and structural resilience is different than it was in midlife. If walking leaves you feeling more fragile than empowered, it may be a signal that your body needs a different stimulus, one that prioritizes controlled strength and joint support rather than repetitive impact. By reframing the goal from accumulating steps to rebuilding stability, you begin to shift from simply enduring movement to strategically improving it, which sets the stage for safer and more effective progress in the chapters ahead. For decades, health advice has emphasized counting steps as a simple way to measure progress. Yet after 60, the real issue is rarely how far you can walk, but how much strength you have to support every step you take. Many adults assume that if they can still move around independently, their muscles must be adequate. But strength loss often progresses quietly beneath the surface, gradually reducing power, stability, and resilience long before dramatic symptoms appear. This slow decline can make everyday tasks such as climbing stairs, rising from a low chair, or carrying groceries feel heavier and more demanding than they once did, even if you are still technically able to complete them. The body does not primarily lose endurance first, it loses muscle mass and fast-responding fibers that are responsible for stability and quick corrective movements. When these fibers weaken, balance reactions slow down, and the ability to catch yourself during a misstep becomes less reliable, which increases fall risk even if your cardiovascular system remains reasonably healthy. Walking, especially at a comfortable pace, does not place enough resistance on the large muscles of the legs to significantly rebuild what has been lost, because it uses only a fraction of your available strength capacity. As a result, you can accumulate thousands of steps each day without meaningfully challenging the muscles that protect your joints and keep you upright. This is where many well-intentioned routines fall short because they focus on movement volume rather than movement quality and resistance. The goal after 60 is not simply to keep moving, but to create a stimulus strong enough to tell your muscles they are still needed and must remain active and capable. Muscle tissue responds to demand, and when demand decreases, the body conserves energy by allowing that tissue to shrink over time, which can quietly undermine independence. Strength training, even in simple forms, reverses this signal by telling the body that stability, power, and coordination are essential for survival and daily function. There is also a metabolic component to consider because skeletal muscle acts as a major site for glucose storage and insulin sensitivity, meaning that stronger muscles help regulate blood sugar more efficiently. When muscle mass declines, blood sugar control can become more volatile, contributing to fatigue and further discouraging physical activity, which creates a cycle that is difficult to break. By rebuilding muscle strength, you are not only improving mobility, but also supporting metabolic health in ways that walking alone may not fully achieve. Confidence is another overlooked element that is directly tied to strength rather than step count. When you know your legs are strong enough to support your body weight with control, your posture improves, your stride becomes more stable, and your fear of falling gradually diminishes. This psychological shift is powerful, because fear itself can alter gait patterns, causing shorter steps and a guarded posture that increases stiffness and discomfort. Strength training restores not only physical capacity, but also the sense of security that allows you to move freely without constant worry. It is important to understand that focusing on strength does not mean abandoning cardiovascular health, but it does mean prioritizing the foundation that supports all other forms of movement. A strong lower body reduces joint compression, improves alignment, and distributes forces more evenly, making every step safer and more efficient when you do choose to walk. Instead of chasing a daily number on a screen, the more strategic question becomes whether your muscles are strong enough to handle your body weight with control and stability. When the emphasis shifts from counting steps to rebuilding strength, the entire approach to aging changes because you begin addressing the root cause of instability rather than its surface symptoms. This shift sets the stage for a safer, more targeted exercise that strengthens the exact muscles responsible for independence, which is what we will explore next. If the true goal after 60 is to rebuild strength safely and efficiently, then the most practical movement you can begin with is one that mirrors real life, rather than mimicking a gym routine, because the body responds best to exercises that directly translate into daily independence. The movement that accomplishes this with surprising precision is the controlled chair sit-to-stand, a simple but highly effective exercise that targets the quadriceps, glute muscles, and deep stabilizers of the core without placing excessive strain on the knees or hips. This is not simply standing up and sitting down casually, but performing the motion with deliberate control so that every phase of the movement strengthens the muscles responsible for balance and joint protection. The reason this exercise is so powerful lies in the fact that rising from a seated position is one of the most fundamental human movements, and it is also one of the clearest indicators of lower body strength and longevity. Research consistently shows that difficulty standing from a chair without using the hands is strongly associated with reduced muscle mass and increased fall risk, which means this single motion contains valuable information about overall functional health. By training this pattern in a structured and controlled way, you are directly reinforcing the ability to get up from a sofa, a dining chair, or even a low toilet seat without assistance, which supports both dignity and safety. Unlike walking, which distributes effort evenly and rarely pushes muscles near their strength capacity, the chair sit-to-stand requires your legs to lift your entire body weight against gravity during each repetition. This creates a meaningful resistance stimulus that signals the muscles to grow stronger and more responsive over time, especially when the descent back into the chair is performed slowly to maintain tension. The lowering phase is particularly important because it strengthens the muscles in a lengthened position, improving joint stability and enhancing control during movements such as descending stairs or lowering yourself into a car seat. Another key advantage of this exercise is its low-impact nature, which reduces repetitive pounding on joint surfaces while still delivering substantial strength benefits. Because the feet remain planted and the movement is vertical rather than forward, shear forces on the knees are minimized, allowing individuals with mild joint discomfort to train more comfortably than they might during extended walks. The glute muscles, which often become underactive with age due to prolonged sitting, are re-engaged during the upward phase of the movement, providing additional support to the hips and lower back. The simplicity of using a chair also removes many barriers that prevent older adults from beginning strength training, because there is no need for specialized equipment, expensive memberships, or complicated instructions. The chair provides a built-in depth marker that ensures you are lowering to a consistent position each time, which helps track progress and maintain proper form. This consistency builds confidence because measurable improvement becomes visible as the movement feels smoother, stronger, and more controlled over weeks of practice. What makes the controlled chair sit-to-stand especially effective for retention and motivation is that progress is tangible and immediate, as many individuals notice improved ease in daily transitions within a relatively short period. When you can rise from a chair without hesitation or arm support, it reinforces the sense that your body is regaining capability rather than losing it, which strengthens commitment to the routine. Instead of wondering whether your walks are helping, you can directly feel the increased power in your legs each time you stand. This exercise is not a replacement for all movement, but it serves as a foundational strength builder that corrects the underlying weakness often masked by habitual walking. By mastering this simple yet strategic motion, you begin rebuilding the structural support system that makes every other activity safer and more efficient, setting the stage for a step-by-step guide on how to perform it correctly in the next chapter. Knowing that the controlled chair sit-to-stand can rebuild strength is only the beginning, because the effectiveness of this movement depends entirely on how it is performed, and small adjustments in setup and tempo can dramatically change the results you experience over time. The goal is not speed or exhaustion, but precision and muscle engagement, which means each repetition should feel intentional rather than rushed or automatic. When done correctly, this single movement becomes a focused strength session that activates multiple muscle groups while protecting the joints that often become sensitive after 60. Begin by selecting a sturdy chair that does not roll or slide, ideally one with a flat, firm seat and a height that allows your knees to bend at roughly a right angle when your feet are flat on the floor. Place the chair against a wall if possible to prevent it from shifting, because stability in your environment allows you to focus entirely on controlled movement rather than worrying about balance. Sit near the front edge of the seat so that your feet can be positioned directly beneath your knees, about hip-width apart, with toes pointing forward and heels firmly grounded. Before you initiate the movement, gently engage your core by imagining that you are bracing your midsection as if preparing to cough, which helps stabilize the spine and reduces unnecessary strain on the lower back. Lean your torso slightly forward from the hips rather than rounding your shoulders, keeping your chest lifted and your gaze directed forward, because this alignment shifts your center of gravity in a way that allows your leg muscles to generate force more effectively. Press evenly through your heels and midfoot as you begin to rise, consciously activating the muscles at the front of the thighs and the glutes at the back of the hips. The upward phase should feel steady and deliberate, taking approximately 2 to 3 seconds to reach a fully upright position with your hips and knees extended but not locked aggressively. At the top, pause briefly to reinforce balance and posture, standing tall with shoulders relaxed and abdominal muscles gently engaged, allowing your body to recognize this stable position. Then begin the descent slowly, pushing your hips back first as if you are reaching for the chair behind you, bending the knees in a controlled manner while keeping your weight distributed through your heels. The lowering phase is where many people lose the opportunity for strength gains, because dropping quickly into the chair eliminates muscle tension and reduces training stimulus. Instead, aim to take at least 3 to 4 seconds to lower yourself, maintaining control until you lightly touch the seat without collapsing fully into it. If possible, pause for a brief moment just before sitting completely, hovering slightly above the chair to maximize muscle activation before gently settling down. Breathing plays a crucial role in maintaining stability and managing blood pressure during this movement, especially for adults who may be sensitive to sudden changes in position. Inhale gently as you prepare to stand. Exhale slowly during the effort of rising, and then inhale again as you lower yourself back toward the seat, avoiding the habit of holding your breath, which can create unnecessary internal pressure. This rhythmic breathing pattern enhances control and keeps the movement smooth and sustainable. For beginners, starting with 8 to 10 repetitions performed in 1 or 2 sets is often sufficient to stimulate adaptation without overwhelming the joints or muscles. As strength improves and the movement becomes easier, you can gradually increase repetitions or add a third set, always prioritizing quality over quantity. If standing without using your hands feels too challenging initially, lightly placing fingertips on the armrests or thighs for minimal assistance is acceptable, with the goal of gradually reducing that support as strength builds. When practiced consistently several times per week, this structured approach transforms a basic daily motion into a powerful strength-building tool that supports independence, stability, and long-term joint health. By focusing on controlled execution rather than speed, you ensure that every repetition contributes meaningfully to stronger legs and greater confidence in your movement. Once the controlled chair sit to stand becomes part of your weekly routine, the changes that begin to unfold are not limited to stronger thighs or firmer hips, because this movement influences systems throughout the body that directly affect balance, circulation, and long-term confidence. Strength in the lower body is not just about appearance or even raw power, but about how effectively your muscles communicate with your nervous system to keep you upright and stable in unpredictable situations. When those communication pathways become sharper and more reliable, your body responds faster to small disturbances that might otherwise lead to a stumble or fall. Every time you rise from the chair with control, the muscles in your feet, calves, thighs, and hips activate in coordinated sequence, sending signals to the brain about joint position and pressure distribution. This constant feedback loop refines proprioception, which is your internal sense of where your body is in space, and this sense naturally declines with age if it is not challenged intentionally. By repeatedly practicing a movement that requires alignment and balance, you retrain these pathways so that corrective responses become quicker and more automatic during everyday tasks such as stepping off a curb or turning suddenly in the kitchen. Circulation also benefits in a way that many people overlook, because strong leg muscles act as powerful pumps that help move blood back toward the heart against gravity. When you contract the large muscles of the thighs and hips during the upward phase of the exercise, you compress the veins within those muscles, assisting venous return and reducing the tendency for blood to pool in the lower legs. This improved circulation can translate into reduced ankle swelling, warmer feet, and a lighter sensation in the legs, especially for individuals who spend extended periods sitting throughout the day. Improved circulation is closely tied to endurance as well, because when blood flow becomes more efficient, oxygen delivery to tissues increases and fatigue tends to decrease during daily activities. You may notice that climbing stairs feels less taxing, or that standing in line for longer periods becomes more comfortable, not because you are walking more, but because your muscles are functioning more effectively with each contraction. This efficiency creates a positive feedback loop in which movement feels easier, encouraging you to remain active rather than withdrawing due to discomfort or fear. Confidence often rises gradually alongside these physical changes, and this psychological shift can be as important as the measurable improvements in strength and balance. When you experience the ability to stand smoothly without pushing off with your hands, or when you realize that you can lower yourself into a chair without hesitation, it reinforces a sense of control over your body that may have felt uncertain before. This renewed trust in your physical, Capability reduces guarded movement patterns that sometimes develop after minor injuries or near falls, allowing posture to improve and stride to lengthen naturally. Another subtle but meaningful benefit involves joint protection, because stronger muscles absorb and distribute forces more evenly across the knees and hips during both static and dynamic tasks. Instead of relying heavily on passive structures such as ligaments and cartilage, the body begins to depend more on active muscular support, which can reduce irritation and stiffness over time. This redistribution of load decreases the cumulative stress that repetitive walking alone might impose on aging joints. As these changes accumulate over weeks and months, the chair sit-to-stand evolves from a simple exercise into a foundational tool that strengthens not only muscles but also resilience and independence. The body responds to consistent signals of demand and adapts by becoming more capable, and when that capability grows, daily life begins to feel less like a negotiation with limitations and more like a continuation of autonomy. By understanding how deeply this movement influences balance, circulation, and confidence, you can appreciate that the benefits extend far beyond the chair itself and into every step you take thereafter. Strength and safety are not opposing goals, and once you understand how to build one without sacrificing the other, you can begin designing a weekly rhythm that supports your body rather than exhausting it. The key is recognizing that walking is not the enemy, but it is no longer the foundation, because after 60, the priority shifts toward preserving joint integrity and muscle capacity before layering in additional movement. When strength becomes your anchor, walking transforms from a stressful demand into a supportive complement that feels lighter and more stable. There are still situations where gentle walking is beneficial, particularly for cardiovascular health, mood regulation, and maintaining social connection, but the context matters deeply. Short, intentional walks on even surfaces performed after your strength session or on alternate days allow you to enjoy the benefits of movement without relying on walking as your primary tool for leg conditioning. When your muscles are stronger, each step places less compressive force on the knees and hips, which means the same walk that once caused discomfort can feel smoother and more controlled. A practical weekly structure might include performing the controlled chair sit to stand 3 times per week on non-consecutive days, allowing the muscles time to recover and adapt between sessions. On those days, you can add a brief 5 to 10-minute walk afterward if desired, using it as light circulation rather than as a test of endurance. On alternate days, a gentle walk alone may be appropriate, but keep the duration moderate and focus on posture, stride length, and steady breathing rather than chasing distance or step counts. Listening to your body becomes essential in this phase because healthy muscle fatigue feels different from joint pain, and learning to distinguish between the two protects long-term progress. Muscle fatigue presents as a temporary heaviness or mild soreness that resolves within a day or two, whereas joint irritation often feels sharp, localized, or persistent and may worsen with repeated impact. If discomfort increases steadily or lingers beyond a reasonable recovery window, reducing volume and reassessing form is a wiser strategy than pushing forward aggressively. Safety guidelines also deserve attention, especially if you have existing medical conditions such as uncontrolled blood pressure, recent surgery, or significant joint degeneration. Rising slowly from the chair and pausing briefly before walking helps prevent lightheadedness, and maintaining steady breathing throughout each repetition supports stable circulation. If balance feels uncertain, performing the exercise near a countertop or with a stable support nearby can provide reassurance without reducing the strengthening effect. The broader lesson is that intelligent training replaces blind repetition, and this shift in mindset protects independence far more effectively than any single metric ever could. By building strength first and layering movement thoughtfully, you create a system that respects the realities of aging while actively countering its most limiting effects. You are no longer simply accumulating steps, but strategically reinforcing the muscles that allow you to stand, climb, turn, and move through your environment with confidence. Over time, this balanced approach becomes less about exercise and more about preservation of autonomy, because the ability to rise from a chair without hesitation represents far more than leg strength. It represents dignity, safety, and the freedom to participate fully in daily life without relying on assistance. If this perspective has shifted the way you think about walking and strength after 60, take a moment to reflect on how your current routine supports or strains your body, and consider implementing this simple chair-based strategy consistently over the next several weeks. Small, controlled actions repeated with intention often create the most meaningful transformation. If you found this helpful, stay connected for more practical strategies that protect your health, strengthen your body, and help you move through each decade with greater stability and confidence.